My name is Caleb Johnson, and I'm going to be giving my speech over the effects of video games on the human brain. So, starting off, according to Statista, I think that's how you pronounce it, .com, the majority of people who play video games tend to play 4 to 7 hours a week. That adds up to around 364 hours in a year. But what do all those hours spent gaming or spent playing video games do to the human brain? Well, that is what I plan on addressing during my speech. I'm sure that anyone listening has played at least one video game in some capacity during their lifetime, whether it be a mobile game on the computer, or on console or something like that. I myself began playing video games when I was real young. I don't remember exactly how young, but I've been playing them as long as I can remember. In 2019, I spent 1,361 hours playing PlayStation. And then in 2020, during the pandemic, it actually almost doubled, clocking in around 2,524 hours total throughout the entire year. But I mean, you can't really blame me. That was just because of the lockdown. I didn't have much to do. So now I plan on informing you not only on what effects video games have on our brains, but also what factors play into how they affect us. First things first, you should know that how video games affect you is largely circumstantial to any number of factors, including but not limited to something like age, maturity level, time spent playing, and genre of game, stuff like that. So, one of the major factors is dependent on what genre, like I said, is dependent on what genre you play. And there are many different genres. There's as many genres as there are as many genres of books. You got horror games, fantasy fiction games, just stuff like that. A good example is puzzle games have actually been shown to improve memory and stuff in people who play them a lot or so much time a day. And kind of the opposite, horror games have been known to desensitize the effect of fake violence. From what I can tell on the stuff that I found online, it mostly just showed that it was fake violence that it affect or desensitized to, but it did affect it nonetheless. Another major factor apart from that would be, or that might just be one of the most important ones, is the amount of time you spend playing, which I'm sure that comes as no surprise to really anyone, because just like anything, you spend too much time doing it, it's going to end up being bad for you. You spend too much time brushing your teeth, it's bad. But for example, a clinical study in China sought to learn what decreasing spent time playing video games over the course of a year would do. And to their surprise, they found that it actually led to a decrease in brain activity in the people who played regularly and were considered good at the games that they played. But to the people who only played the more like their control group, they actually didn't see little to no changes in them. So it seems to only affect people who play a whole lot. And then another factor you may not initially think of can have a big impact on, One factor that you may not initially think of that can have a big impact on how a game affects you is the age and maturity level of the person who's playing it. For example, you wouldn't want to let a little kid, say around like 6 or 7 years old, sit there and play something like the Blair Witch Project or GTA 5 or any of the GTA games, to be honest. But and I mean, that's just common sense. You don't want kids to see violence and commit acts of violence in a fictional world until they're mature enough to understand that something like that just is fake and it's wrong. It's simply wrong. But these age and maturity level tend to go hand in hand, so that's why I coupled them together. And moving on now I'd like to take a more precise look at the effects of video games on the human brain by themselves. A study conducted by the people from the Behavioral Brain Research Team at the University of California, Irvine, I don't know how to pronounce that, found that having elderly people play video games with rich 3D environments actually helped increase the hippocampal based memory, and it helped improve that. So at their age, that would normally be deteriorating, and like that's when you start seeing their minds slip. But this actually helped not only prevent that, but it actually helped improve their state of being. So that's just one way that it affects us. It helped increase their neuroplasticity in their brains. Another way is video games are normally played on something like a keyboard, or your phone, or with a controller. And every single one of those includes using your hands. And what that does is that increases hand-eye coordination to the point where it's actually insane. And I've heard that they even want surgeons. It helps surgeons do their stuff. One other effect of video games that isn't as great as the previous two things that I've mentioned is the constant release of dopamine that video games tend to have, and it's just a constant stream, and it tends to act a lot like an addiction if it happens for too long. And that's one of the major reasons you don't want to play for way too long, because it can and will form an addictive patterns, just like a drug almost, and it can have repercussions just as such. So in conclusion, while many of the effects video games have on our brains can be beneficial, it is important to remember to regulate yourself in order to avoid the bad ones. It's really just like anything else. Too much of one thing is bad, and I mean, everybody knows that. Anyways, I hope this has inspired you to go check out some video games, or possibly even regulate how much you're currently playing video games. And remember just to be safe.